we're going to talk about the lesson that you did on the one activity with the pictures. How do you think the lesson went?
I think overall the lesson went really well. My kids were very excited and were involved the entire time. I didn't see any kids throughout the class or the lesson that were bored with it, so it kept their imagination going the entire time.
And I noticed that too.
And then especially at the ending with my closure, whenever I asked them how it went and if they liked it, I had good responses.
And for third graders, they did, like about sharing the ideas, about working with the partner, like
Yeah,
a lot of third graders don't think that deeply about what they're doing.
Yeah.
So do you think it was successful then, overall?
Most definitely.
Okay. What are some examples of student learning that you saw going on as they were working on it?
Most definitely the collaboration.
Okay.
The way that they were editing each other's sentences. They were trying to give each other hints as they would pass the pencil and the paper to one student to the next.
Mm-hmm.
They would lean in and talk and help each other pull that imagination out to get that next sentence flowing with the entire story.
And then, like I said, I liked how you left the one piece of paper and then the one pencil. I think if each would have had their own paper and pencil, even though they would have supposed to have shared their ideas, I think it would have been a little bit more chaotic.
Most definitely.
Especially with a younger group like that. I think the idea that, and there was the direction, they knew they had to pass it. Now some I noticed pass it to the left instead of to the right, but they were consistently passing it in the same way. They weren't like just passing it to a friend or someone else.
And that's a little bit of an issue in my class because I have an odd number. So some groups are groups of 4, some are groups of 3. So the groups of 3 are the ones that get the rotation wrong. Yes, but it still kept the flow of going in a circle, even if it was counterclockwise, not clockwise. It was fine.
The one group of 3, I said, I think it was supposed to go to her next, and she goes, well, there's nobody here, so I didn't know what to do, so I said, no, I can understand. I was just trying to figure out what her logic was.
Yes, it kind of got it a little bit mixed up. It was okay.
No, I think it went really well. You mentioned when I was observing that you did another creative writing activity around Halloween. What was that like? What exactly did
you do? I gave different prompts, and so I want to say one of them off the top of my head was you are carving a jack-o'-lantern with your family. Is it a happy pumpkin? Is it a scary pumpkin? Is it a comic pumpkin? Kind of, because a lot of them I did it way before pumpkin carving time was around, and so it got them thinking about what they wanted to do if they did carve a pumpkin, or if they don't carve pumpkins at home, what they would like to do with their family.
Did they work in a group setting also on that one?
No, that was individual, and so what I did with your activity, it was different, but they weren't as creative when they were by themselves. I saw with this activity it was way more creative. It brought out that visualization and really brought out that creativity with each student.
So then this activity showed you something different, that they were more creative?
Most definitely. And their vocabulary that they used. The vocabulary was way more creative. And one group actually used sounds. They used, the giant was walking and it was like fee, fo, fum, something like that. When they used dialogue, and that was something completely different for my third graders.
Well, and then one group, I remember the kid said he found a foot. He saw a foot, or they found a foot, and then became friends with the foot.
Yes.
Or something, and then the other ones, they saw the foot and the arm or whatever, and then they giant.
Yes, it ended up, it's like they saw the foot, and then they traveled up, they saw the leg, the knee, the body. It's like they started, looking up the top of the giant and realized it was a giant at the end.
Right, I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
What were the instructional look-fors in your lesson? Like, what were you looking for in that lesson? Were there any things that you were going into the lesson that you wanted to see, or?
Well, I wanted to see really my highs help my low students bring that creativity out and be able to put it from in their brain to pen or pencil and paper, and be able to explain what they are visualizing.
Right.
Because in my lessons right now, we are reading and learning about visualization, and it's hard for my students, so this activity really helped my low students understand visualization.
Right. And there's a lot of good books. I'm ordering some that have those vivid verbs in them.
That's
so
awesome.
That will help them, use those words in their writing because they're so connected. Like if they visualize when they read, right, and then when they write, you want them to use those same kinds of words to help them write.
Yes. And as I've been teaching visualization, I've seen it come out of their daily oral language a little bit if we do a writing activity, but this activity that we did, the telltales or...
Right, the telltales.
Yes, it really did help them a lot.
And so, I know we had talked about the DOL. The DOL you said is basically grammar based?
Right now it's basically grammar based. And right now we are going over like simple things like breaking up syllables and editing sentences, really helping them when they do write, they're spelling words correctly,
right,
and it's not making their writing so unorganized and unreadable. And so that's what we're working on right now, getting those basics down.
Did you do you do any reflective writing, or is that something that you would like to work on in the future?
Right now we don't do reflective writing, but in the morning times when they do come in, we have a morning meeting, and I'll put up a question up on the board, just like Monday was Veterans Day, and so I wrote a prompt about Veterans Day and asked if anybody had any veterans in their family or knew of someone that was in the military, and so that's more reflective responses, but it's just oral responses. Eventually I would like to take those oral responses and put them on paper.
And y'all do the morning meeting, is it every day or just on Mondays?
Every day.
Every day.
And with that, I'm just trying to get what's going on in their minds, those questions, get those thoughts flowing.
Well, and that's what I noticed is that a lot of them have the ideas, they just cannot either verbalize it, or if they can verbalize it, when they go to put it on paper, for some reason, there's a block, and they don't, and I'm like, what were you thinking? And then they'll tell me, and I'm like, okay, but exactly that on the paper, You can always word it differently later, but get the thought down. It's okay to change it, reword it and revise it, but get it down. But they think they have to immediately formulate this perfect sentence to put on the paper.
And that's the issue, and so that's why right now we're doing that grammar work on our DOL. They see a sentence that is misspelled, doesn't have punctuation, doesn't have capitalization. So if they write down that sentence, that thought, and it's not correct, they can go back through later on and edit the sentence and have a good, well-written paper.
Did you notice any misconceptions or breakdowns in the understanding of learning? Did you notice any, one group or one person, or be confused or have a problem with what they were supposed to be doing?
One group, I want to say it was group number 3, whenever they went from the first person that wrote the very first sentence and went to the next person, their second sentence did not flow.
Did not tie in.
It did not tie in, and so I had to, correct that group, and I read it out loud to them and let them hear the story, and it did not flow, and then they understood, oh, we need to scratch that sentence and start over.
So they needed a little bit of clarification.
Yes.
I do like, and I mentioned it to you before, I think the last time, that how you get the kids to come together when they're off. Well, in an activity like that where there's so much dialogue going on.
Yes.
And then you want them to pay attention instead of just, yelling or whatever.
Yes.
I like how you do your little prompts, your little cues that you want to get them. And the younger groups seem to get into those more.
Yes, they love it.
As they get older, they're like, whatever. They're clapping again or whatever. But at least they know the routine. They know what they're supposed to do. There's always going to be one or two that maybe
not
still
really.
off.
Yes.
But for the most part, all of them seem to stop and refocus.
They really do like those little cues. I always try to switch it up from saying clap once, clap twice, or they have to follow my pattern of claps, or I do hocus pocus, beer focus. I try to go with the seasons, and they really do love it.
You can tell that they really enjoyed what they were doing, and both times I was in the class, that I seemed like everything flowed really well, and the kids knew the routine. They seemed to. I never saw a kid that was looked like, oh my gosh, I'm here again, like they all
Yes,
seemed to enjoy what they were
even
doing.
though those times do happen sometimes.
Well, there's
but
no perfect situation all the time.
Yeah.
How did you mentioned grouping your students with high-low? How did you come about grouping them that way with your highs or lows? How did you decide which highs to put with which lows? Like what information did you use to
We
group
use
them?
the iReady program.
Okay.
And so off of the math and the reading diagnostic testing and from the folders that we received the information from second grade at the elementary school here in Divine, I took that information with the diagnostic testing and formulated my groups.
Okay. Do you notice a huge difference in your, let's say if they're high in reading, are most of your children also high in math? Or do you see like a discrepancy? Like,
no, really, if they're high in reading, it's going to help their comprehension level on reading a mathematic problem. And so if they're high in reading, sometimes they're a little bit lower in math, but most of the time
it's pretty consistent.
It's pretty consistent, except some of my students that are low in reading, they're higher in math.
Right.
I do see that.
And that's common, I think, because I've noticed that when I was in the classroom. Like I had some kids that were terrible in their minds as readers. I didn't see them, but then they would be they loved math.
Yes.
Because they couldn't read a lot of the words, but they could do the computations.
Yes.
And then the math test also can be read to them. So the parts that they couldn't get, somebody helped them, read the prompt, and then they were able to do the computation.
Yes, so. And I literally just saw that. I just gave a math test, and my Q&A kids, they love my math test, but whenever I give a reading test, and they have to read that passage by themselves, that's when I see them struggle.
Oh yeah, the frustration level sometimes. Do you ever use flexible grouping by letting the students choose where they sit?
Not choose where they sit in their groups, but I do a lot of partner work.
Okay.
And so I let them pair themselves up and choose their partner for that assignment. And if I see two lows together or two highs, sometimes I let my high kids work together if it's an easier project. But if it's a harder one, I really try to do my medium highs, medium lows kids together. But other than that, I let them kind of pick on their own.
And do you ever let two lows work together at all or no?
I try not to let that happen because then sometimes they end up just lost and frustrated with the assignment. But if I do let them work together, those are that pair I pull to the kitchen table and I kind of guide the assignment for them and really scaffold it.
Okay, good. Overall, like in your class, what percentage do you think like you have in the groupings, like high, middle, and lows? Like, do you have a lot of the majority of your class in the high end range, do you think, or do you have a lot of low kids in your group this year?
I don't have that.
I
don't feel like I do.
Not many lows.
Yeah, my class average is pretty high.
Okay. Is there anything that you felt needed to be tweaked in the lesson or adjusted to make it more effective for your class or your grade level?
I feel like honestly it went really well for my grade level. Since my kids are higher, I wasn't too concerned about doing the project, but if it was a lower group that I had, I would have explained it a lot more before I even handed out the prompt or showed them the picture. It was more of a warm-up for my kids because I feel like I have a higher class. But if this was a lower group that I had, I would have really explained the instructions, showed them a picture, and then I would have done an example.
So as a teacher model?
Yeah, I did not do a teacher model or an example at all for my kids. And so I was a little bit worried about how it went, but other than that, it went really well.
No, I think it did go well. We talked the other day about, you mentioned that the one thing that you wished maybe you would have done differently would have been projecting the picture longer.
Yes.
Do you think that made a huge difference?
I don't think it made a huge difference, but I left the example of the prompt up, but they already had the prompt on the paper that they had and that they were sharing. So instead, I wish I would have replaced the prompt and showed the picture the entire time because they didn't need the prompt.
Right. And most of them, I think, knew what a beanstalk was. They all had tied it to some other story, at least that they had read before, that had a beanstalk.
Yes.
They mentioned, Jack and Jill.
Jack and Jill and the Beanstalk.
I've never heard of Jack
I've never
and Jill.
heard of Jack and Jill, but they all said it.
Yeah, so it must be some story they read before.
Yes, but they all knew what a giant beanstalk was, so it did help. I did not think that they were going to know what a giant beanstalk was, so that's why I chose it. I wanted to see if they would pull that creativity out, but it flowed. It went really well.
And do you think eventually, like, adding more cards to the activity, like, I mean, I would not give that grade level obviously like 10 cards, but maybe like 2 or 3 cards total? Do you think that they would be successful eventually, like with more guidance
Yes,
over time?
definitely. With how I have a higher class and how well it went with just one card, I feel like definitely if I throw in a second card, do a second card for a while, and then add in a third card towards the end of the school year, I think they would be very successful with it.
Do you think there is a way that you can extend it where your groupings gradually get smaller, where they would be maybe successful working on it on their own?
I think maybe if I scaffold it, if I did one card, showed one picture for a while, let them do the group of 4, group of 3 together, and then scaffold it until when they did, it on their own for one card, then went back to group, do 2 cards, let them work together, scaffold it to them doing 2 cards by themselves. Really just scaffold them learning.
Right, and that's key, is like, doing a lot of modeling.
Yes.
And showing that you, like you said, if you were to do the write yourself, showing your ideas.
Yes.
How you were thinking, and out loud, those processes that you're thinking out loud, where they kind of get their minds going as well.
Yes.
Just have a couple more. We talked about how we would like to extend it. What other writing skills would you like to see them work on? Like, what's something that I could look for if you need any resources, or what writing skills did you see that maybe they needed to work on?
One thing that I have been trying to explain in reading is dialogue. When they see those quotation marks, that is because someone is talking in the passage. And a lot of my kids during this assignment, they used dialogue, but they didn't use quotation marks, the commas, they didn't use the correct punctuation. And so that is something that I could use your help on, is how to introduce using quotation marks on their own in a fun and creative way.
Right, and for kids, I mean, I think too, like finding books that have a lot of dialogue in them would be a good start, like some good mentor texts.
Okay.
That have the dialogue, and it may be some that you could even project, that show when someone is speaking.
Okay.
This is what it looks like, but that would be a good start. But and they're still young, so I know that's a skill that y'all probably will build on as the year progresses.
Yes, and I know coming up soon, I want to say it's next week, we start dialogue and using those quotation marks in language arts. But I guess maybe as more times I use this, then we'll start using quotation marks throughout the year.
And it's a maturity. Some of it is a maturity thing, what can I do to help you and your students be successful in this area or any others? Like, are there any other areas in your classroom that, even if it's not just reading or writing, that tie to reading and writing? Are there any other areas that I can help? Or
what I struggle most with my students is reading. My low students do struggle with reading comprehension, and right now it's whenever I do give a reading passage, it's them going back and finding that text evidence. Okay. Oh my gosh, that is what I struggle on with the most.
Do you use any specific strategies to find, like, do you have every teacher has their own little strategy?
Yes, I have my own little reading process, and it's where they have to read the story. Well, first they underline the title. Okay. They understand what the story, is kind of about before they even start. They read the story once, then they read the story twice to really try to get clarification what's going on, get that comprehension going. And then they read the question, don't even try to answer it, go back in the story trying to find out where that question is in the story, where it's coming from, and then they try to find their text evidence and then answer the question.
Okay. What do you do, like, with your low students that maybe that struggle to get to the passage? If it's taken them too long to get to the passage, do they have to go back and read it again, or how do you? Because like when the STAR test is timed, and I hate to say STAR test, but like, do they have an alternate strategy? Or?
Sometimes they don't read the passage twice.
Okay.
But one thing that I tell them is that if Mrs. Hogue takes this test, I better be able to look at the reading passage and see, oh, this is where she found number one. Because
Right.
it's underlined, there's a number one. I want them to be able to show me where they found their answers without me even looking at the questions.
Right.
And so that's what I look for my low students, is them trying their hardest to prove their answers.
Yeah. In the future, if you do, we're going back to the writing, or any assignment that you do, how do you ever have them self-assess what they've written, or like the peer edits? Do you do peer edits? I know you said some of the peers were automatically editing. Do y'all ever do that on a formal basis yet?
Well, we haven't started that yet, but that is something that I need to start doing. Maybe after Christmas time, because they are such little babies when they come to me. It's hard for me to say, okay, pass it to your partner and have them edit your writing, when it's hard for even my high students to sometimes write, even a paragraph or two. We're working on it, but that is something that I would like to eventually get to.
What about rubrics? Would rubrics help? Like if I found some rubrics that
definitely,
you could use for third grade?
Yes, in college I always read about rubrics. I even incorporated rubrics in my own lesson plans, and I sadly have yet to use them in my own class. But that is something, it's kind of hard for third grade to say, this is a rubric, I want you to follow it, this is what I'm looking for. I just feel like they're my little babies still, and I have to guide them so much.
Well, and I always felt guilty taking a grade off of a rubric.
Yes.
Because there's such a broad range of how you think if they were successful or not. And so I felt guilty, like, on a scale of 1 to 4, giving a kid maybe like a 70 or 75 when, certain parts of it were bad. I mean, it was just, I had to really work on it when I used a rubric.
Yeah, so if really with your help, I would like to start incorporating rubrics.
Okay. Any other questions or any other comments that you might think of, or
just from your presentation, you showing me, because we did this in your presentation and I loved it, and it made it easy for me to start seeing how I would use it in my own classroom. So really, you presenting it to me made it so much easier.
Okay, good. All right, I think that's it.